Hey, Divine Ones, it's Jerome Braggs. Welcome for another edition of Wellbeing Wednesday. Today, I have a very special guest with me. She's one of my favorite people in the world. And when I began to think about doing a show where we talked about what it takes to be well and live well as souls having human experiences, there was nobody else I really wanted to talk to than this woman, Monique. And so I am really, really, really glad to have Monique on the show. And especially for this topic, I've watched her over the years really express very vulnerably her own journey into being a fully healed and fully expressed being around this topic. So I know for me, one of the greatest pieces for my own healing journey and for me living a well and delicious life was fully embracing my sexuality, not just who I was attracted to, but how I wanted to be in relationship with people. And I think that she is one of the greatest teachers I know around that and one of the greatest embodiments around that. So I'm excited to introduce you all to Monique. But before I just fully turn it over into her, I want to read you all a little bit about her here. So I'm going to introduce you, read a little bit of your bio here, Monique. Monique holds a bachelor's degree from Howard University. And it's so funny, it wasn't until you sent me this that I didn't know you were a fellow HBCU alum and that you went to Howard. I don't know why I didn't know that before. But okay, so Monique holds a degree from Howard University in politics and history and a master's degree in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica. She is an astrology and feminine power coach whose work is dedicated to helping women of color create new ways to help heal from their traumatic past and live lives worthy of their full selves. So, in diving into that, Monique, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's so my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I love you so much. Okay.
I love you too.
Okay.
Um, in diving into that, one of the things that we're talking about today is really healing ourselves by embracing our sexuality.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about what your personal journey has been. What were some of the things you had to heal from in order to fully be the actualized being that you are around your sexuality today?
Mhm. Um, so thank you for that. That's a really good question. So the one of the things that I've had to heal from is, I mean, it's a very interesting conversation. So I'm going to go to the very beginning of it, which feels um, kind of esoteric. But when I was a child, an infant, my parents were very young. My mother was 17 or 18 when she had me, and my father was 6 years older than her. So that made him 23. And that's back in 1968 or so. Um, and I have memory of that time, of the energy. I don't have actual memory, but I have feelings, memory of feelings, right? And so my parents would have sex in the bed with me. They would have sex with one another, with me in the bed with them. And I was, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, a year old. And that energy of that sexual energy was very potent. And I'm a very sensitive being. So it was almost as if me tapping in, or being a part of their field, um, short circuited my own energy field
Mm-hmm.
because I was an infant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I was taking on too much energy for my little field. And so that is the first thing that I literally just realized not so long ago, that was that I've been for my entire life kind of overriding my natural frequency,
Mm-hmm.
because it started happening at when I was such a very young child. So they weren't touching me physically. They weren't doing anything to me. They just were doing what, a 19-year-old and a 24-year-old want to do, right? And I was there. So there's no fault of their own. But literally, because I'm very empathic, that overrode my natural frequency. And so at an early age, I plugged into an energy of desire, like desiring sex, desiring to touch that pleasure point before I was really ready for it, before it was something that I'm ready for. So I started, I remember I started masturbating when I was 3 or 4 years old, literally masturbating to orgasm at that young age, because I had been in the field of that for so
Mm.
long. So I remember the sounds of my mother. I remember the sounds of her pleasure. I remember the feeling that was in my body that felt orgasmic. And so that was something that from a very young age, I just started to tap into. But then when my ego came on board, then shame came. So by the time I got 7 or 8 years old and I was exploring with other children and hearing stories of that's bad or that's good or don't do this. So then I started to become ashamed of my ability to access pleasure. And and then at some point I realized that my mother was a very sexual woman because I was Christianity, right? Christianity had come in and said, if you're a woman who enjoys sex, that's sinful, that's shameful. Don't be a harlot, don't be a whore. And then lo and behold, my mother was a whore. I didn't know, right? But as I started to pay attention and learn, and as a child, you're absorbing your environment. You don't have an ego on it. You're not making things right and wrong. You're just taking everything in. And so I was just taking it all in and realized that my mother, energetically, she's just a very sensual woman. And then the doctrine from Christianity put me at odds with my mother's natural way of being, which was also a part of my way of being.
Mm.
So I started to judge myself. I started to feel like, oh, I'm wrong for this sexual desire. I'm wrong for this ability to touch myself and create pleasure. I'm wrong for something that was very natural, that felt very natural. I'd started to really feel guilty about it. And when I became a teenager, I was 13 years old, I started actually having sex. And my journals today, when I go back, I still have them, are so filled with conflict, so filled with God, forgive me for being so bad, for being sexual. God, please take this desire away. And then I would fall in love with every little boy, because to me love was the thing that made it okay. Like if I could declare love, right? Like,
Mhm.
so, oh, it's so dramatic. But it's a teenager, right? A teenager growing up without a lot of direction, without a lot of information, and I'm figuring it out on my own, right? And I'm following my clitoris to figure it out, and the Bible, right? And so there was just all of this internal conflict that truly overwhelmed me and confused me. There were my hormones that were like, the hormonal urge is very strong. It's like the need to eat, right? So once you tap into that pleasure zone, it's no turning it off, right? So by the time I was 13, I started having sex. By the time I was 19, I probably had 20 lovers.
Mm.
And then the conflict, the internal struggle because of my Christian upbringing, and then having a mother that was a prostitute was confounding and depressing, and created depression, and then there were pregnancies, and just all of it was so traumatizing. And so what happened is, when I got married at the age of 35, as soon as we got married, we just couldn't have sex. Like, we literally had no sexual attraction to one another. And I was so aware that it was because we were both carrying wounds. We have both been subjected to sexual activity and sexual energy long before we were truly ready for it. We had not been given information or education about our sexuality, about our spirituality, how the two go together. So when we came into this marriage and lived in this house together, immediately we both shut down, and we had no idea how to move through it. So we just projected upon one another and blamed one another. And I was filled with sadness because I believed he didn't want me. I remember us being in the therapist's office and me saying, I don't understand why he doesn't want me sexually. And it was, I know today, because the energies between us were polarized and we hadn't done any work to heal it. So we were just living in the wound. So that was my real call to realize that there was something deeply wrong, that here I am following the rules. I got married, I'm
Mm.
in love with this man, and now there's no sex when I've done what the Bible says I should do. And so, so once we got divorced, I started really taking taking a serious look at what was going on with me, and realized that my relationship to my mother and my early childhood environment had was very toxic and had created a reality inside of me that put me at odds with myself, um, from a very young age. And I'm healing it all the time, and I just have become I have language for it now. I understand the feelings around it. And because I am not projecting any longer and more at peace with what's truly going on inside of me, it allows me to be able to explore my sexuality in a much more healthy and aligned way.
Mm. Would you say that there were aspects of your sexuality, because of some of the messaging that you got, that made you repressed in a way? And now,
Yes.
before I say that, I want to share a little bit about
Mm,
my story with this.
mhm.
So I've shared a lot about my healing journey from, kidney failure and HIV. And one of the parts of that, one of the pieces of my healing journey was I was celibate for 6 years.
Mhm.
Why I was celibate for 6 years was because I had a sex addiction before that came
Mhm.
from, my addiction came from shame. And
Mhm.
sex was the way in which when I had sex with somebody, that was the only way where I felt enough. Right.
Mhm.
So for me, sex was a feeling. I was using it to feel enough. And so when I had my near death experience and was told, I have to do this self work, love to heal, one of the aspects I needed to do was I realized, okay, the way I am around sex, there's something
Mhm.
toxic in there for me.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
needed to, kind of like some of the addiction therapies where you have to kind of go cold turkey for a minute, but
Mhm.
not, but I knew, one, I didn't want to go to cold turkey from sex ever again, right? I wanted to be able to have it, but I wanted to be in it from a different energy space.
Mhm.
And so I needed to kind of abstain so I could heal my energy first.
Yes.
Well, one of the things I thought was going to happen was when I did this healing, this energy, was I was going to come out of my process. And instead of wanting to be with many partners, I was going to want to be with one person for the rest of my life. And that I wanted to be a monogamous, exclusive relationship I thought that was going to happen.
Mhm.
But after I healed, the desire that came up for me was to have relationships with several people.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there was still messaging in my head around, and narratives from the culture that I grew up in that said that was wrong, And so there was a
Yeah.
lot of internal turmoil around that for me before I began to experience my freedom around that. And so
Yes.
one of the things this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I've seen how you've spoken to that over the years and really worked through
Mhm.
that. So I wanted to ask you, that question as well. Um, what were some of the challenges you faced to get to this point? I know you spoke about some of the trauma that you had around it,
Mhm.
but what were as a woman, as
Mhm.
a Black woman in
Mhm.
America, I can imagine the way you express your sexuality today was not what the dominant culture said was okay.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
what was some of that, some of the messaging that you've had to go through, um, to get your healing? Because there's many of us in the world today who are
Mhm.
I think, and going back to the original question,
Mhm.
re, how were you repressed around
Right.
your sexuality, and what did you do to really come out and express, and then make that expression okay with yourself?
Right. So for me, I kind of approached everything through the prism of like what Christianity had convinced me of,
Mm,
because I am like most of us, all of us, I am a naturally spiritual person. Like, I love sacred practice. I love worship. I love the idea and experience of God and mysticism. All of those things that like Christianity, prayer, all of that felt very natural to me. And and what Christianity did was that it told me that my sexuality was wrong. So if you are a woman, you need to be chaste, you need to be pure, you need to be you need to behave in a certain way to be worthy and valuable in order to be loved by God. And so that meant that I would never sleep with a married man, that I would never look at a married man, that I would, if I was not married, I would not consider sex. So all of those beliefs were just in there, like, ugh. I mean, they were like, for lack of like thoughts that just kind of made me crazy. So one of the so when I was in this marriage, that in a marriage with my son's father, who's an incredible man. I don't want to speak about it like it was a flippant kind of thing. When I was in my marriage, um, I and there was the sexual challenges between us, like it never occurred to me that I could possibly have another lover. Like that my needs it just meant that I was locked into this marriage and I couldn't do anything to take care of my sexual needs because of the marriage. So as soon as I got out of the marriage, I literally started questioning that identity around Christianity and marriage and all of that. And I started dating a married man in an open relationship. So, and it wasn't something that I pursued. It was something that my soul actually brought to me because it was something that I needed to confront inside of me. So met this man who was I met this man and his wife together at the same time, um, and had a great conversation with them, and then learned that they were in an open marriage and started dating this man and having a sexual relationship with him. And it was really the most healing thing I'd ever done, honestly, because like actually being in the act with him, having him in my bed, sharing my body, sharing his body, having a sexual experience with him gave me permission. It was almost like, oh my God, like lightning is not striking us down right now. Like that was the belief, right? I mean, like we are not being pulled into the gates of hell right in this moment. There are the demons fire. I mean, this sounds ridiculous, right? But it really is an internal reality that was connected to my sexuality and had me controlling myself. And then not only like attempting to control myself, but then acting out in ways because I couldn't control my sexuality. It's so powerful. So I couldn't control it. I could control it and then I would vomit it out. Then so I'd be in bed with, you know, three, oh, how this is how I would do it. I would be in bed with men from all the same fraternity, not at the same time, but I would sleep with this friend and this friend and this friend because my sexual energy was just, it was bubbling over and I didn't know how to control it. So I had to come to it through the ways that I was holding shame and guilt and fear. And once I literally neutralized those experiences by facing them, not by judging them, not by talking about them, but by actually facing them. So I would, if I wanted to have sex with somebody that I just met, I would have sex with them and I would ask them for sex. I would say, look, I want to have sex and that's all I want. And I would let that happen. And that would heal me because my mind had been telling me that that was something perverted. And when I would do it, I would realize, look at who I am here. Am I perverted? No. Is there anything wrong going on here? Absolutely not. Is there pleasure here? Yes. Do you owe this man anything? No. Are you sharing? Yes. That the act would heal me. So I did that, and then I dated this married man, and the act of that, it healed belief systems inside of me and gave me the permission to make peace with my Christianity, my Christian upbringing, my mother, and then make peace with my body, like what it meant to be a sensual, desirous woman, like what it meant to really be a woman who truly loves sex and the connection and loves men's bodies. Like I saw a picture of you the other day. Like when I see those pictures of you, I'm totally turned on. I'm like, oh my God, because I love Black men. And it doesn't matter to me that you're a man who's attracted to other men. I don't care about that. You're a beautiful man. And that enlivens me and gives me pleasure. And so now I'm just all about it. Like, I'm like, ooh, it's sometimes I have to know when to turn it on and when to turn it off. Like if I'm with a woman and her 22-year-old son, and the woman is my age, like 50, and her son is 22. And I'm like, okay, I can smell him. But I'm like, that's her son. Don't do that in front of her.
Yeah. So you said something really, well, first of all, thank you for that.
Yeah.
There is something I really want to dive into, touched into here, which was something that was revealed to me from my soul, or you may call it source or God, or however people want to name it, in my healing journey, which was not that there is a healing aspect to sex and sexuality, but we have this perspective or this belief of what healthy sex is, and what my soul, I had this very mystical experience where my soul was basically like, there's no such thing as healthy sex. There is healing sex. There's not healthy sex. And why that is because healthy sex is when both people are fully, completely aligned in their frequency. And usually while we're human, it's almost, I won't say impossible, but it's very, very, very rare for a being to be fully, completely embodied at all times in their frequency. You're always either 75% or 85%, or like coming into more of the embodiment of your frequency. But what healing sex is this the sex that helps you embody more of your frequency somehow.
Yes.
And so for some people, and this is kind of what I see when I work with clients a lot, which is what was the case for me. So when I came out of my celibacy, what the case was when we have lived lives of repressing some aspects of our sexuality, what that actually does is when we repress, it's like pushing down. And what it makes you do is it makes you become starving.
Yeah.
And so a starving person, right? So if you take two people, a person who usually eats, regularly every day, and a person who hasn't eaten in a month or something like that, you sit them down to the same meal, right? The person who eats is going to take small, slow bites.
Yeah.
Right? The starving person is going to be throwing everything. And the person who eats every day, they're going to eat the things that they think, are the most nutritious for their body or whatever. The starving person is going to eat. They're going to just eat. They need to
everything.
Just get in. And that is, so a part of their healing process when you're starving is to ingest a lot. And so that was what I realized from my healing process was, after I had done the parts to heal the shame, which was the root cause of my addiction.
Yeah.
But through the process of doing that, I had also repressed my sexuality. So in order for me to heal, I needed to eat. And while the internal messages in my head were saying like, no, that's not the right thing to do. You need to be with this one person. What my soul was saying, what my energy was saying is, you need to eat a lot right now.
Yeah.
You just need to eat for a minute. And then this is going to balance out. And then you'll have another viewpoint of how your sexuality will operate. But I think you spoke about that, about like the healing process. And I think we have this very big misnomer around I want to say misnomer. We just have some very false and toxic narratives around sex
Mm,
and sexuality. And I have seen it disconnect people from their natural frequency and cause dysfunctions, and a lot of the diseases that I've worked with people around. The core root
yeah,
of that is
yeah,
they're disconnected from the joy, because one of the aspects of our natural frequency is joy.
yes, yes, yes.
And a part of joy is pleasure. And if you're not
Mm-hmm,
getting in pleasure in your life, whether that's through however you want to have fun,
mm-hmm,
whatever your passions are, you're going to be disconnected from the love frequency that you are. And
yeah,
nothing can work well in your life if you're not.
yeah,
And one of the things I don't think we talk enough about is how sex
mm,
fuels the love frequency through you, and
mm-hmm.
how it gets through you is going to be different. For it's not one way for us to
That's
feel
right.
that through. And especially I think for women, especially Black women in
Mm-hmm,
America specifically, well,
mm-hmm,
actually, now that I think about it, if I tune in, that's kind of worldwide for Black women.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But especially for Black women, the idea of being, I don't see what the best word for this is, fully satisfied
Mm-hmm.
sexually and fully pleased.
Mm-hmm.
We've had it in this one little box, and it's
Yeah.
your pleasure has to be in marriage, and it has to be very clean and tidy.
Yes.
And that's just not working for people. It's working for
Yeah.
some, but
Yeah.
it's not a blanket statement that works for everybody. And because of that, there's so much repression energy in the world.
Yeah.
There's so much repressed energy.
Yeah. It's really fascinating because once I started studying, it was when I studying astrology and how astrology has helped me. It's helped me sort of make peace with what goes on inside of me, right? Because I am I have a like I'm very creative, and what I had to learn was that my creativity, my sexuality, and my spirituality are all one thing. So if I'm judging any of it I'm cutting it off, and because I cut it off with my thinking, I make it wrong. I judge myself. If I'm judging that, then that's how it will show up. But um, it's been this opportunity for me to really understand that my sexuality is a part of my daily thinking. Like I'm constantly in a conversation internally about my sexuality. It never turns off. I'm attracted to everything. I'm almost attracted to every human being in some way. And I had to, like, I read this book called Vagina, by by Naomi Wolf. And then there's this other book called What Do Women Want by Daniel Bergman. And these books talk about women's sexuality and how we have been conditioned to detach our minds from our actual sexual desire, so that we are often not even aware of what is sexually motivating us, because we've been conditioned out of our natural ways of being. And so my work has been to just acknowledge what turns me on. Like, oh, I see two dogs, like sniffing each other out, and I'm like, yeah, they're about to get it on. You know what I mean? It's just like it's just, like I see two flies flying together, and I'm like, ooh, yeah. Like it's like that's a natural part of my energy field. But I feel like that's true for most people and women if we give ourselves permission to be that way. And so, what hampers it is, as women, we get around one another, and then if you're around a woman who's with her spouse, there's this energy of like, you can't be attractive or sexy around another woman's husband, because he might be attracted to you, right? And like as children, we were told, don't be fast, don't switch, cross your legs, all this sort of stuff, so you won't tempt a man, right? So it's our responsibility we're responsible for his attraction, when attraction is the most natural thing ever. Everybody's attracted to everybody. You cannot help it. It's how it is. That's why there's so many workplace affairs and Because if you get people around one another long enough, the libidos are going to start going. And it's just how it works. So my work has been to allow myself to feel those energies and then redirect them for creativity, redirect them for my spirituality, or redirect them but I know what they are now. I'm not judging it. I don't make it wrong. And so I get to use it in ways that actually help heal me and up level my own way of being and my health, because it's healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, there's a lot I could go in with that, but I would be remiss if I don't tackle this topic with you while I have you
Okay.
here. The topic of open relating. So you talked a little bit about it before, but since we were talking about some of the messages that we've gotten, and when we're trying to embody our unique signature frequency and what's right, which means following the joy path that is unique for you, right? And I know one of the things that you've done is explore and experience open relating. And so I want to talk a little bit about one, I have a few questions. One, what is your definition of open relating? And how has that helped you tune into a deeper truth for yourself?
Okay, thank you. Good question. So my definition of open relating is really about being open to who you truly are and bringing that into all of your relationships. There's this, I feel like all my life I have been told, girls should talk this way. If you're attractive, you should behave this way. And all of those things kind of went against who I really am. And so once I got divorced, I started to realize, well, these are my ideas about relationship. This is what I feel about sex. This is what I feel about politics. And most of my ideas were often unlike the people that were raising me or the people that I was in relationships with or friendships with. I remember once when I was very young in my 20s having a conversation with girlfriends, and the conversation of somebody cheating coming up and me saying, well, why is somebody having sex with another person like the reason to end a relationship? How come you can't learn to practice forgiveness in those kind of experiences? Like what could forgiveness offer a person that, that's different than cutting somebody off or making them wrong for something? And I remember my friends being like aghast. They were like, ah! And so that to me was me just being myself. That was me just being open, right? That wasn't me. I was truly being who I am. And so to me, open relating is I get to show up as I am in every relationship. And so do you. And that includes our sexuality. So if that means that I'm attracted to a woman, I'm not gonna hide that. Or if that means I'm attracted to a man, or I'm not here to cross people's boundaries, but I'm also not here to oppress myself. So how do boundaries and my true authentic self-expression exist as I am relating to myself and others? That is open relating, truly being myself in all of my relating. And that includes my sexuality. And so is that the answer that you're looking for?
Well, no, I was just wondering what it was for you. So I touching on that word that you used, because this is, my field and work and vision and all of that is about energy. So I think one of the words you used which really stood out was oppressive. And I think the message here is that you have the right to experience, and I think this is a message that, again, I know I didn't get growing up, was you have the right to live a life that is free and that feels free, and that all compartments of that life feel free. And what I found is, especially now that I do healing work with so many people around the world, is so many people's version of relationship feels oppressive.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that we don't even get the image that there is another type of relationship. So I don't believe that there's one relationship style for everybody, right? So I
Right.
don't believe that monogamy is the way for everybody. I don't believe polyamory is the way for everybody,
Yes.
or open relationships is the way for everybody. I believe there's a right way for you that makes you feel the most at home in your own frequency and free.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think that for so many of us, we didn't even know there was an option on the table for relationships. Like, prime example, I had a client
Mhm.
um, many, many years ago who had extramarital affairs, and at first, when I first talked to him, he had like he said two, but as we got into the work and being the intuitive that I am, I knew that wasn't energetically, that didn't feel true. And as I
Mhm.
began to go further into that, um, found out he had more than 20 plus marital affairs.
Mhm.
And initially he had come to work with me to deal with his cheating and all of that.
Mhm.
And yes, there were wounds behind, under trauma behind why he was cheating and all that, but as we
Mhm.
also dove into that, I was like, I don't think your energy really, do you really want a monogamous exclusive marriage?
Mhm.
And he kept saying, yes, yes, this is exactly what I want. I only want to be with this. And I said, well, if we really look over your behavior for the entirety, because you have
Yeah.
never been, right? Now, if
Mhm.
you came to me and you said, in these past 2 years, I have
Mhm.
been, but I've been married for 20 years, and 18 of those years I was this for these past, then we can look at, okay, there's some wounding here. We need to look at what's happening here and kind of fix it. But the entirety of the marriage,
Right.
never been.
Mhm.
So this isn't what you really want. And I think
Mhm.
the idea of, we are allowed to have what we really want
Yes.
and
Come
to
on
live
now.
how we really want.
That's right.
That idea has been so divorced from us. And when you
Mhm.
understand what you are as a soul, that's the only thing that source
Right.
wants you to have, is what you
Yes.
really want, right?
Yes.
And again, what you authentically want, because there's a difference between what you just randomly desire, but what you authentically soul deep want, because that's your true soul desire. And I
Yes.
just don't think a relationship that doesn't look like a monogamous exclusive one was even on the table in messaging for most of us.
Yes.
And so we live these relationships that feel oppressive.
Exactly. It's such an it requires for us to get to know who we really are, right? That's the thing. It's like that has been my thing, like to give myself permission to know who I really am and to explore that. And here's the thing, let me tell you the part that has been the most difficult in it is like, what are my friends gonna think? Right?
Mm.
It's like when I have, I'm a 50-year-old woman, and so I have friends who've been married for 30 years and friends who still want to be married and friends who all of this. What are they going to think when I tell them I'm dating a married man and they were in an open relationship? And because it's threatening to people. Like there has been, um, and so what I have done in that is I have told my friends, I have said, okay, so here are the things that I'm doing. How do you want to be with this in this relationship? Because I'm willing to not share with you. Like, I'm a woman and we talk a lot about our personal lives, right? So it's like, do you want me to not share with you that I'm dating this married man? Do you want me to, do you want to take a break on our friendship? Like, what is really going to be true for you? And it's changed my life. And, one of the things that I've noticed is that, people really trust me now
Mm.
because I live in my truth out loud. People come to me with their deepest secrets, and and I get to hold the space for people, and I love I love that opportunity to be with people in that way. But what has also happened is people in my life have opened up into their truth because they see that I'm not being struck down with lightning. Maybe they're not going to be struck down with lightning either.
Yeah, it's So I want to, because in the interest of time, I know we had a time frame, so I want to hold that for you because
That's
there's so
okay.
much. There's going to have to be a part two because there's so much
Okay.
more to this. But I want to get to this because I
Hmm.
know for many people, because this has been such a taboo topic and because sexuality has been so repressed on many levels, there's not a lot of understanding about this. So I want you to speak to this because I know
Hmm.
one of the things that triggers people when they hear about open relationships, because I have many actually most of my close friends, and I never thought this because I was the person that grew up thinking monogamy and exclusivity is the only relationship available
Right.
until I began to have close friends, like really deeply, like brothers who I would give my limbs to if they needed them.
Yes.
Um, they began to have open relationships.
Hmm.
And it began to, and I began to, and it forced, it was like my soul was bringing this right to me to heal
Hmm.
these
Hmm.
mindsets that I had. And it was only through that I began to understand. I had close encounters with open relationships. So I understood what it really was, what it wasn't, how some of the falsehoods that we have, what it actually takes to be healthy, what it doesn't. I got to
Hmm.
see all of that. And so I want you to speak to this a little bit as education wise, because I know what triggers most people when they hear about it is they
Hmm.
think, especially when you say, when you use the words, I'm in a relationship with a married man, what triggers people is they think he's cheating with you and that the
Right.
other person doesn't know.
Right.
And that there's some toxicity going on in it. But I want you to speak to like what that actually is, because it's
Okay.
not in
Yeah.
the healthy sense of the word, and how you have been in yours that you've done it. There's none. So I want you to speak to that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. That's a great question because yes, people do think that there's cheating going on, and in the open relationships that I participate in with people who are in marriages, the wife knows and the husband knows. And I've had two relationships like this, where I've been in relationships with men who are married, and in both situations, I've been friends with both of their wives. Um, Now, I will say that it requires a lot of truth telling, a lot of taking responsibility, a lot of processing, because we are human and jealousy gets triggered and inadequacy. But in the relationships in the life that I live, it's because my life is about healing no matter what. Whatever I'm doing, it's all about healing. So in the life that I live, I come to everything from the perspective of healing. So in both of these relationships, it's always been about taking the opportunity to use these experiences to heal myself. And and so are they fantasy? No, they're challenging like any relationship. They are. And in one of the relationships I was in for a while with a couple, I was in a relationship for about 6 months with a couple who had been married for 20 some years. And when the relationship started, they had the year before they were almost about to break up. And because their marriage was just shifting. And so they didn't want to break up. And they thought that it might be good to see if they could open their relationship up so then they could have other partners and also still work on their marriage. And so they took a year to figure this out. And then when they got clear, they decided to open their relationship up, and I started dating the husband. And what I got to see about myself in that relationship, because the issues of their marriage showed up in my experience with them, right?
Mm.
It that did show up. Um, it showed up that they had a very business relationship that wasn't necessarily sexual. So the sexual intimacy that can go on in marriages wasn't happening between them. So that was a source of, there was a wound there for them that then agitated the wife because now he was being sexual with me and other women that he wasn't able to access with her. So that created a thing, right? It created jealousy, created power struggles and all that sort of stuff. So I got to see that, and we processed that and worked that out and told the truth and cried and argued, but we knew that we were here to heal. We knew that we were healing. That is what we wanted to do. Our desire was to create a situation that would bring our stuff up so that we could heal. Now, what ended up happening is they ended up breaking up, and I stopped seeing the man, and but now they're in happier experiences. Their relationship ended. It just ended sort of because it was ending. And it's like the open relationship was the bridge for them to sort of give themselves permission to move out of the relationship and into new relationships that were going to be more suited to them. And I got to learn a lot about myself. I got to see myself do a power dynamic thing with another woman. And that was hard to watch. Like I got to see like the part of me that was competitive, is what I would say. So I watched me like pull energy in the relationship, like because she was wanting to like claim him, like I would pull the energy energetically, and then like I could feel them when they were making love. Like it was a very spiritual, intuitive thing, but I made a commitment to being honest and being transparent, and so did they. So everything was on the table, and it unfolded the way it did, and I learned a lot, and so did they. And I'm not connected to the woman anymore, but I am still friends with the man. And he comes and he gets readings from me, and he's my friend. And when he's in town, we hang out and we have a good time. Another relationship that I was in, this couple, they're still married, and they're a really famous couple who practices polyamory. And I have been able to really work on healing myself with this couple because I have been able to work out my parental issues with them. So the woman shows up very much in a maternal energy with me, and the man shows up in a energy that helps me heal my wound with my father, is what I'll say. So it's not like, because that's kind of weird. Like if it's like he's not like my father, but he has a masculine presence that helps me heal the wound that I have with my father, which was that I didn't trust men. I couldn't be vulnerable. I couldn't be a child. Like, so I get to be in these ways with him where I get to be very vulnerable with him and share my feelings. And he just meets me in this place that is so nurturing and loving. And his wife totally creates the space for that to happen.
Mm.
And so, you know, I come to practicing open relating and polyamory the way I come to everything in my life. That is to heal. So none of it is just about like, yeah, though I do love like wild sex, you know, that I have had experiences that are really, I've had experiences of threesomes, and they are fantastic, right? They are interesting and exciting, but they are also healing at the same time. And so it's not about the sex, it's about the energy of shifting into a more empowered person who is relating in a way that's true to who I am. And it's not for everybody. And I don't think that people should do it if it's not something that they really are interested in for their hearts and souls.
Mm. I think that is a wonderful place to, I'll end it for there. There's going to be a part two because I already know for those watching, there's so many questions and so many other areas that we want to go into. It's particularly about just the idea of approaching sex from a healing perspective and having the sex that heals you truly,
Mm-hmm.
that heals
Mm-hmm.
you and allows the more full expression of you to be on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what we'll talk about even further the next time. I have some rapid fire questions I want to ask you.
Okay.
So I ask all my little guests. So I have some rapid fire
Okay.
questions to ask you. So just
Okay.
whatever comes up from the top of your
Okay.
head, or I can tune into it.
Okay.
First, what's your definition of well-being?
My definition of well-being is living my life from the inside out. Like that my internal reality and my external reality are very much connected and feel like, oh, I'm having one thing going on. And what goes on inside of me is also going on outside of me. Then we're good. That's
Mm-hmm.
well-being for me.
What's one activity you can always count on that makes you feel well?
The beach, going to the ocean.
Mm,
It's everything for me.
mm, same.
Hmm.
What advice would your future, happier, healthier self give to you in your life right now?
Stay anchored in your faith.
Mm,
It's like I'm holding polarities right now. I'm literally holding the vibration of what I am calling in for myself. And my higher self is reminding me every day that I can do it.
mhm.
You can do it.
Love that.
Yeah.
What's one guilty pleasure you have that's totally worth it?
Huh. I really like porn.
That is my first time hearing someone say that.
I do. It's it's like it's interesting because occasionally, it's not an often thing, but I really like to watch the story of of what goes on in pornography sometimes. Like I like to watch women in parties where they're like at a party with there's like a bachelorette party and then watch the women who actually like have sex with the stripper or give the stripper. Like that kind of stuff is so fun to me because I'm like, oh my God, who has the courage to do this? Who's gonna be the one that like can't turn it down? They're gonna do it in front of everybody. I love that. Because that
Yeah.
woman loves sex and that woman is going to go for it. And when you're going for it in front of your friends, it's like, it's so, like, that's so badass to me. I love it.
I have something to tell you about after we get off of here. Then speaking about that, just things, something
Okay.
you might find funny.
Okay.
Last question. What's one thing you wish more people would talk more honestly about in public?
Hmm. How they truly feel. Like just how they truly feel from a place of responsibility, like not blaming, but really owning their feelings and their emotions and not being ashamed of them or judging them, but really being able to own it. I think
Mm,
that's a great way to live our lives.
mm, just breathing
Mm.
all of that in. Thank you so much for being here. As always, I love you. I'm sure you will be back
Thank you. My
in
pleasure.
many different forms. And for all of you all watching, thank you for watching. As always, I love you. Go love yourself. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye, everyone.